The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. No co-host today. It's all quiet because we're doing the week of Thanksgiving USA. So hopefully everyone's having good battles before they're prepping the turkey, and then more battles when they eat the turkey tomorrow. That's how it works. So, special guest today, excellent guest, lots of experience and some great writing here. So, Mr. Dan Flanigan, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, Dan, I was kind of going over your history, and wow. I find it's interesting, not only because it's interesting, but you've also incorporated it into your writing as well. It's a very big part of your writing in your books. So let's talk about some of that history of where you got started before we get into the writing part of it. You started in with, I guess, being a lawyer somewhere down the line. So maybe tell the listeners who you are and how you got there.
Yes, I am still a lawyer, still sitting in my law office right now. But I wanted to be a writer from the time I was a sophomore in high school. And throughout my life, really felt pretty frustrated not doing it. And here, though, after many years, I end up being able to do it at a time when I don't have to starve to death doing it and so on. So things worked out better than I deserved in that regard. It's hard to have anything to write when you're a kid anyway. So I ended up in graduate school, got a PhD in history and a law degree at the same time, and taught for a couple of years at the University of Virginia. This is ancient history, but then ended up was a civil rights lawyer for a few years, and then ultimately went into private practice and spent 30 years there, but always with a level of frustration, not always, at least till 35, a level of frustration for not doing, in quotes, what I was supposed to be doing. And then complicated, and I have no problem talking about this since I've been sober now for 40 years, complicated by alcoholism. And at age 35, I got sober and took some time off, and it was an incredible period of time because I opened with my wife a treatment center in Arizona, wrote several plays, several short stories, wrote a novel, and so on. I ended up, back in the practice of law with a different attitude about it, but then in the last few years have been able to get serious about writing and have published 5 books since 2018.
Wow. Yeah, but it's interesting that when you were opening up the addiction treatment center and you were having those issues, that you went to writing. So is writing something that you had always gone to or done, even if it's just for yourself, as a way of coping with things?
Not really. I just felt it was my vocation and mission in life from a very young age, and caused myself a lot of pain and my wife a lot of pain too, just being frustrated for having not done it. So all of a sudden I had this period of time, partially enforced, but also just took time away from everything and just started writing.
And when you say, frustrated for not doing it, did you think there was something bad if you wrote? Like it was a bad thing to be focusing on writing?
No, I think I was afraid, number one, of failure. Two, I'm not sure I had all that much to write about back then. And it just seemed like I just didn't know where to start, where to enter, how to do it, how to deal with it. And it just was simpler to go make a living, be a lawyer, and live practically.
Go get a steady job, be a lawyer. There's lots of crime out there. So now what's the type of lawyer that you were practicing in when you started writing?
I have basically been, I was a civil rights lawyer for a few years, but in private practice, which has been most of my life, I've been a finance, and that included bankruptcy lawyer, a lot of banking work and debtor creditor work and so on. So in that position over decades now, I've really been involved in lots of scams, schemes, and scandals, hopefully not perpetrated by me, but just dealing with the fallout on the legal side.
Yeah, that's all part of the American life. Now, I'm guessing that this is probably why you center your books, this book series with this detective or this main character, in the 1980s.
It's a little more complicated than that. During this period in the mid 80s when I, did the treatment center, and the plays, so on, I wrote the first draft of the first book in the series back then, and got an agent, got a publisher. Of course, what happened is that the publisher went bankrupt, et cetera, and all very frustrating experience. And I just said that this is a crazy world. I'll go back to practicing law. But then, much later, kind of pulled that book out of the box and said, this is worth doing. And I substantially rewrote it. But so that book was actually written in 1986, and I didn't feel like trying to make it a contemporary type thing. And then it occurred to me what would be really interesting is to use these characters and sort of tell the history of our times in a way, or at least certain parts of it, through these characters over time, and of course introducing new characters as it goes along. So as long as I can keep up with it, I'll bring this thing up as close to the present day as I can, although the first three books haven't gotten me out of 1988 yet. But
it's a lot that goes on then. Or was there an actual event or thing that happened that made you decide to try to publish the very first time, and when it failed, you actually pulled the book out later and rewrote and buffed it up and did it again? What was it that kind of lit the fire under you to actually go and do it and actually put it out there, get it published?
My wife died in 2011, and I wanted to do something about her. Not exactly a tribute, but sort of. And I wrote a book of poetry. It's called Tenebrae. It's published. And in the course of that, and I also had, our law firm has a great thing where they give you give the partners a sabbatical that you can take every 6 years and take 3 months off. So during that 3-month period, I was writing on that book of poetry. And in the course of it, I pulled the book out and said, this really is a good book. And so let's give it a try. And so that's really what prompted it. And then having more and more time to do things than I had before like that. So it just it was a spark that allowed me to really move forward on all this.
So now the subject of it, like you decided to kind of follow kind of part of what your career is, or use a lot of your own life experience in this, and this is part of a series. Now, of course, the latest book that we're talking about is On Lonesome Roads, and this is book 3 of the Peter O'Keefe series. So let's talk about Peter O'Keefe and this 3-book series. What was your initial idea behind this? Like, what was your thought on when you were creating this series?
First of all, the Mink Eyes is the inciting incident, if you will, is a mink farm Ponzi scam, and I actually was involved in that as a young lawyer. It represented a bank that was part of the defrauded group, and I assure all the world that my situation wasn't as interesting as what happens to Peter O'Keefe in the book, but it gave me an interesting thing, I thought anyway, to write about. I just really wanted to write literary fiction, and I wanted to write a coming of age redemption type story. That was when I myself was sort of late coming of age and redemption in the sense of addiction recovery and so on. So, but I thought, instead of just navel gazing sort of thing, I want to make it interesting for people, for readers. And so I put it in this detective mystery format. And once I finished that, I think I saw how that genre could let me write about some serious things, but do it in a more exciting and interesting way for people. Why not make it interesting?
Yeah, and so the main character, or Peter O'Keefe, who is that person, and how did you come up with him?
It's not me, even though you can't get remove yourself entirely. Although I have a lawyer character in it that this isn't, anyone who's read the book, it's not flattering when I say this, but I've tried to put more of me in that character so that I wouldn't have my main character be just autobiographical kind of thing. But he's a Vietnam veteran, substantial, PTSD type of issues and so on, cocaine and alcohol in his background. He's divorced, has an 11-year-old daughter. And now I was a Marine. I didn't go to Vietnam, although came close, and many of my friends did. I think it was a core thing about my generation's experience. And so I wanted to put that in the character. I wanted to make his work more exciting than a lawyer's life. So I made him this private detective. And by the way, the reason he's a private detective is that his lawyer buddy, Mike Harrigan, pulls him out of the gutter and says, "I'm going to make a private detective out of you." And there's a strong friendship bond between those two, running through these, at least these first 3 books, and probably would continue.
So when you where did he come from in essence for you? Like I asked this of a lot of fiction writers. Is this a character that is a combination of other people you've met, or do you get characters that just come to you in your dreams, so to speak, or do you create them? And how do you experience these characters when you're putting together a book? Do you have conversations with them? Do you hear voices? Do you see them like a movie? I ask all these questions because I get yeses to a lot of them.
Peter O'Keefe is not based on any real person at all. And I tried not to make him based on me. I mean, I have a daughter about that same age. I never got divorced, etc. But I really try to make him somebody on his own and not me. Although I had a friend of mine during the pandemic who said, I'm reading this book, and so it's like having you around, So, you can't take yourself out of things necessarily, but in the course of it, I really do try to enter into this other humans that's not totally unlike me. It's the same age, same generation, similar experience in some ways, but I try to think, how's this guy gonna think in this situation? And he's in situations where, despite the original thing about the mink farm, I've never, basically been in, although, there's a big part of the second book, Big Till, that's the S&L scandal and a trial. I was in all around that thing, but not in the same way that he is. So I really, I guess I try to think like him, and I sort of do talk to him, although not out loud.
Well, yeah, like you're not waking up in the middle of the night with a shovel in your hand or anything, right?
Right.
Nothing going on there. Well,
yeah.
Well, it's funny when you put this together. How do you choose which scandals you're going to use throughout the series?
Well, the mink farm was just, something in my background. I had never heard of anything before that, and I never was involved in anything like it afterward. It was just so exotic and interesting. It was down in the Missouri Ozarks too, which is an interesting area, and so that drove that, and then in all three of the first three books, the mafia is a big part of it, and of course, in the 80s is when the mafia really was being transformed, and in some ways the traditional mafia was dying. And so there's a lot of that in there about the struggles within the mafia itself. And he gets in trouble with them. And a lot of what goes through the first three books is him trying to extricate himself from that. And then having been involved so much in and around the S&L scandal, and some people I know being, actually criminally prosecuted in that situation. I just made that part of it. But then sometimes it'll just be something that grabs a hold of me. The fourth book, which I'm working on now, is not something I was personally involved in, but was the satanic panic and daycare witch hunt of the 1980s that produced the McMartin situation and the Kelly Michaels trial in New Jersey and so on. So I'm doing a version of that. I have a notion as I move into the 90s to do something around right-wing militia stuff. I have a notion about doing something about the foster care system, kind of a modern Oliver Twist deal, all within this O'Keefe universe, but so on. So I see those as possible future things, but I don't know till I get there what I can make out of them, if I can make enough out of them to be a good book.
Yeah, you're going to have Geraldo have someone throw a chair at him or something.
Right, and of course Geraldo was huge in that.
Yeah. He rode that one to the bank, and that's what it is. And now you're right. So you're taking kind of true events as you're going through this series, things that are real, like they really have happened, and then you're fictionalizing. So at what line do you fictionalize? Is it primarily the characters that are fictionalized and their relationships? Do you create a whole new type of crime that happened using the same crime that was real in the time? Or how do you draw that line? Like where do you see it set out?
I would say that the situations are what was going on in the world. The characters are fictional. Not based on real people, but people that I can imagine in those situations and the fallout from it. I mean, for example, and I do try to make these realistic in the sense of they all could happen in the real world, and it's not just crazy plot twists and superheroes and all that kind of stuff. I've got a character in this latest book on Lonesome Roads who's female co-head of the local mafia for a brief period of time, which didn't happen in my city, but might have happened in other places. And that's an example. She wants to get out of it as fast as she got into it, but
well, how do you tackle then writing the bad guy? How do you get into the mind of someone that's bad and doing the wrong thing in the story?
Well, maybe there's that side of it in me, maybe in most of us, but again, I just try to project enough, let's call it empathy, into those people, and try to portray like they think it. And I've read, I don't know how many books on the mafia. So it eventually sort of seeps into you. And they're not all just totally vicious monsters either. They're not, romantic heroes by any means that they're often made into, but they're more complicated often than just brutes.
So how do you describe your books as different than, let's say, what other people are? Like why what's different about your thriller books than what's going on today?
I have a hard time. It's not the first time I've been asked that question. I don't know if I know my genre well enough to fully answer that question. I can only say that I believe they are more realistic than most books in the genre, not all by any means. I think that there's a real personal struggle that this guy goes through, and with his family, with his daughter and his ex-wife, trying to deal with that and sort of make good on the things he screwed up in the past, rather than just in sort of, as he says, I'm going to become a more useful person in the world. And so there's that. So there's that family domestic dynamic to it. It may be a little different that I focus some on the business side of the private detective work, and that business and how he does that. But beyond that, I'm not sure whether I'm any different or how. I'm just trying to write what makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, it sounds very interesting. And one of the things I was going to talk to you, write about the mafia, and that's interesting. The mafia in itself, when you write about them, of course, in your books, I guess you're writing fictional mafia characters, right? You're not taking the real ones. But did you ever worry about any sort of a kind of a backlash from mafia if you write them in a negative tone, even if they are not real?
No. Maybe I should, but I don't. But I'll tell you what, they're just not. First of all, the 80s is a long time ago, right? Most of those guys are dead,
right?
Yeah. And they're not. They just don't have the same power they used to. I really developed that theme in the third book on Lonesome Roads. It's just out. Heck, everything they did has become legal, so it kind of took away their livelihood. That plus RICO, plus the wiretaps. There's a real wiretapping theme and recording theme in the third book.
Why do you think it's almost like Western gangsters, Billy the Kid and all this stuff, and mafia figures and stuff. They're almost kind of a novelty, it's a favorite of a lot of the audience. Like people root for a lot of those people. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's to the extent that I think about it, I'm disturbed by it. You know, you go completely back to Jesse James, who was a scoundrel, not a good guy. But over time, those people are romanticized so much. And I think with the mafia, it was also associated with a fascinating ethnic group, primarily, not exclusively, that portrayed these family values and so on, that just made them more interesting than everyone else. But the Americans have this thing about outlaws. They hang them on the one hand and admire them on the other. And I hope I don't have any. I try not to romanticize them. I don't try to make them the most evil villains in the world, but I try not to.
Well, I mean, you can just write for who they are and what they do, and
yeah, right, that's enough. Right.
Yeah, and let people decide. But I'm surprised by it every day that how they're idolized. They're almost like mini rock stars, and they do bad things.
Yeah, right. One thing I don't do is the Breaking Bad sort of thing, where the villain remains a villain, and you're supposed to sort of, or the Sopranos thing, and you're supposed to sort of admire them. My good guys are a little more good guys. They might make mistakes. They might do stupid things. They might even do wrong things. But it's not noir. Everybody's rotten, and you're supposed to come to love them anyway.
So when you're writing, what kind of mood do you have to be in, or does the mood affect you at all? Can you just sit down and you've got the spare time and you can just turn it on and turn it off when you want?
No, it's really hard for me. I say that I write manic depressively, and it'll be, I'll go along and not do anything for a while, and then all of a sudden just really turn it out. And I can't even fully explain it. I have come to stop beating myself up when I'm in sort of a fallow period. And something's going on there, ideas are coming out that I hope are enhancing the story and everything that I don't fully understand what I'm up to, but it has a good result in me.
I find I have much the same problem, so I can relate to that.
And also, as a lawyer, I've written to deadline my whole life. And all of a sudden, not writing the deadline, you got to, sit there and generate it, without any kind of outside pressure. And once you're used to a certain thing, it's a little harder. On the other hand, I've written quite a bit in a fairly short period of time, so I'm
that's part of the manic.
When I'm manic, I'm very manic.
Yeah. I get that. I do that. So when you these books, when you've written these books, did you have the idea of, let's say, all of them ahead of time? Do you kind of know where it's going to begin, middle, and end, and the main event? Or do you actually have to kind of work through it as it goes?
So far, I've always known where it's going to end and almost envision the last page. And almost always the last page pretty much is what I originally envisioned. But I don't do a super detailed outline. I might have a sketch of where it's going. I have, like many writers, the hardest time with the middle, in terms of how am I going to get to where I need to go here and still make it and not get lost and still make it interesting and so on. So, I do leave myself room, for creativity in the process, including plot, creativity.
At the end of the day, like when someone picks up one of the books and they take it home and read it, what do you hope they take away from the book?
Mainly people who are by no means perfect, struggling in difficult situations, sometimes self-created, sometimes created outside of them, and dealing with them or coming to terms with them in a realistic and generally positive way. I guess I'll take this opportunity to talk about the themes that in the books. One of the main themes is abuse of power, financial power, political power, prosecutorial power, sexual power, familial power, every kind you could think of, anywhere there's a formal or informal hierarchy and someone abusing it. The corrosive effect of keeping secrets and telling lies, often lies to cover the secrets. Sorry to get too philosophical here, but searching for a meaning in an absurd world, but having to stop searching and start living at some point. How to do what people can to heal the world that's around them. The Hebrew concept of tikkun olam, all hopefully humble enough, that it's not as grandiose as it sounds. But people with real, I have a book of short stories that's not detective, not crime. The liner note is people on the verge, and trying to come to terms with difficult situations, many of which they've created themselves.
Yeah, it's interesting how that is. So you want them to have entertainment, but there's always a little bit of a subtext or some sort of a theme throughout. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, very much. Yeah, I hope I'm writing literary fiction that's really just more interesting than all.
Well, that's interesting. So now each book does stand alone, or do you have to read them all?
They do stand alone, and certainly they're meant to stand alone. But the first three books could be called a trilogy. And people have said, it's not just me, yeah, these stand alone, I can read it alone. But at the same time, one does lead into the others. The things that have happened in one kind of set up the next one. That won't be true now, the fourth one, but I hope reading one makes people want to read the others, but I think you can read each one and get something out of it without having read the other.
So what do you like best about writing?
Finishing. No, it's turned out I love revision. It's much more satisfying to me because I've got the basic sculpture, if you will, there, and refining it and trying to really make it really much better.
Yeah, and so at the same time, what is it that you find the most difficult in the whole process of writing?
I guess two things. One thing I've been surprised by, I never thought that I would be good at plotting things, having an exciting plot twists and turns and all that. And other people are telling me that they're there, or I wouldn't believe it. So that I find that difficult, but apparently that's going pretty well. What I'm most irritated and frustrated by is when I hit a place that is hard, or I don't quite believe in it, and I'm trying to learn to power through that better, and then return to it at the end. They always say, do your first draft. It doesn't matter how bad it is. I'm not quite there, so sometimes I need to I need to think more about this, of what I'm trying to do here. Do I need to do that or something else?
Now to capture the setting of the 80s and the location and everything and the timing and that, I guess you would do a little bit of research to make sure you get all the sayings and the timing right of things and capture the whole mood of it.
Yeah, and of course I lived through it, so that helps a lot. But I for the period of time of the novels that are in actual time periods, and I read the local newspaper for that period of time, every day, on microfilm or whatever, and so I get that out of it. And then with a lot of it, I have to do specialized research because you get into something you didn't really know that much about. You need to find out, like when exactly did emails start being dominant and voicemails, that kind of thing. When did this car, when did they start making Jeep Grand Wagoneers versus, something else, and to get those things right. And I was not a criminal lawyer, and I'm not. So luckily I have colleagues that I can get some help from on that. But my legal life has helped a lot, but not, I still have to do a lot of work around, research kind of work around.
Yeah, I would say that's probably some of the hardest part of it, or can take some of the longest time.
Yeah, it does. And this next book is there's going to be a lot of courtroom scenes in it, and courtroom scenes are not easy. You might think they would be, natural drama and so on, but it's hard to draw the line between what's boring and lawyers stuff that nobody cares about, but also to be realistic. I don't know how many lawyers, I'm certainly one of them, that ruin everybody around them by saying, that's not true. That ain't going to, in a courtroom drama. So
you're that guy.
Yeah.
Wow.
I've been chastised for it too. More than
Yeah, I can imagine. So where do you see yourself going with this? Is this something you want to continue on with the same main character and the same theme style book and go for the 90s and the 2000s and even further?
Yeah, yes, I do. And I've already introduced new characters as in these three. So I think I'll be able to, in fact, in this third book on Lonesome Rose, his daughter, Kelly, 11-year-old, has her own subplot mystery kind of detective thing of her own, and other characters too. So I believe I can, make this thing interesting, and introduce new people, new plots, and so on as time goes on. And then I still plan to do occasional, non-crime, non-detective, short story, novella collections, that sort of thing here and there, as I go along.
Is that, do you feel kind of like a natural short story writer like that? Is that why you do them?
I think I might be, but I have, it's not like I have, 60 plots in my head to ready to go. So they're a little harder for me, to get out there, but I'm writing a couple right now that have been spinning around my head for decades.
So your extra characters and the new ones you bring in, and some of the bad characters out there, I wonder. So do you go and you're out at a supermarket and someone buds in line and it's really rude? Do you take that person and kill them off in your book?
No, but I've got a couple. I'm going to say that without being real specific. There's a sportscaster, a pretty famous one, that I've never liked, and I've named a character I don't like his name. and have him act. But I don't do that very often. But sometimes.
Why not?
So anybody who reads on Lonesome Rose can look for that.
That's funny. That's funny.
And of course, the problem is that I'll offend more people probably than I'll make happy about something like that. So you got to be careful.
Yeah, but that's all part of the fun.
Just taking cheap shots that don't really necessarily help your book. Not a good idea.
Yeah, it's all it's all fun. So now, do you find that you get better with each book? Do you think you become a better writer each time you do?
I think that has happened.
Yeah.
I really do. And people are telling me that too.
Yeah.
It's like anything. The more you do it and get yourself out there and get feedback and all that, you probably get better.
And that's kind of a key thing there. But, a lot of writers go through this. Like, so as you do more and more books and you're getting better, if you don't go back to your first books and read them then. Because you'll want to rewrite them. You'll want to correct things and kind of go, oh no, I should do this. Or I should have done this. I'm just warning you now because I've been there, done that. And I know lots that have. So.
Yeah, I'm sure that is excellent advice, and I will very much try to, because you can't get hung up. You got to keep moving.
Well, because you'll never get out of the circle of the vicious circle of going, oh God, I should have done this. And then if you go and redo it, and I know some authors that have done that, and then it keeps on going. It's never going to be satisfactory because you keep on growing. And so you kind of have to look at it like, okay, I wrote it for who I was and at the quality of writer I was at that time. This was me, and it's got to represent that time. And I think you just got to leave it at that. But it's something we all face, I think,
Yeah, right. Yeah. Even now, I'm tinkering with it till the last moment before it's printed.
Yeah, it's a tough one, It's a tough one. Do you have a moment, or do you ever look at a book, or when you're writing something, you're doing something, and you go, "This is good"? Is there something that sticks out for you that makes you feel a book or a story is good?
I'd be lying to you if I say that didn't happen to me a lot in the course of these books, but I can't think of any specific,
it's just a feel
thing. But there's no doubt that I go, hey, I nailed that one.
Yeah.
Or usually I hope I'm humble enough to say I nailed it as much as I can, as good as I am right now. That.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, I guess the treasure is the idea and the thought and what's written, not about how it can be done better. So, or more precise. Yeah, believe me. Yes. So, you were talking about feedback and stuff like that. Do you like to interact with readers or fans or anything like that? Do you do social media? Do you have a website? What is all your information where people can find Dan?
Yeah, yes, I have Dan Flanigan Books, it's called. And the only thing to know there is Flanigan spelled kind of funny. It's Flanigan. And there's a lot of things on that about me. There are I've been around long enough, both as a lawyer and otherwise, and a lot of pages on Google, and I pay attention to my Amazon page and those kind of things. I'm not personally, I've got social media accounts. I'm not much good at it, at really staying up with things. Interestingly, though, there's a scene in the first book, Mink Eyes. That's a Halloween scene with him and his daughter, and kind of a terrifying situation. I actually went on to YouTube and TikTok and read that chapter here a couple, 3 weeks ago. So I do a lot of things like that.
Well,
not as much as I could. But.
No, well, doing something's better than nothing, you know.
Oh yeah.
It depends on how you read it too.
That I don't know. I doubt it was very good, but it wasn't very long. So
yeah. Well, TikTok seems to be a hot thing right now, so you know.
Well, you try things. You never know what's gonna.
Well, you don't. That's what it's all about. But of course, now we're going to have your website up as well on ours, so that people can find you with one click and
the three all my books, the three in the series and the other, the book of poetry and the short fiction, are all available on all the online retail people, paperback. The three Peter O'Keefe books are on audiobooks, so they're out there in every format.
Well, that's great. We need us older guys. We need the audiobooks. I can't read as much anymore.
I'll tell you what I've found is spend a lot of downtime in your car. Those audiobooks come in handy.
Oh yeah. No, I think they're great. I'm a fan. So I have to ask now, when you're writing like this last one that's out over the pandemic time, does that sort of affect the way you write? Because that sort of thing shut down a lot of writers. A lot of writers were unable to handle the stress or the emotional roller coaster that people were having, and all the stuff going on outside of outside of your door type thing. And that did that affect you at all in your writing?
It actually helped me. I have to confess. I was writing the second book, The Big Tilt, at that time, and it restricted all the things you could do in the world, and so I spent it finishing that book, and so in my case, it wasn't that bothersome. All that depends on where you are in the world, and what your responsibilities are, and that sort of thing. But
yeah. Well, you could have went to some anti-mask rallies or something. Yeah, take up your time. Have some fun. Yeah, no.
Yeah, and during the pandemic, I tried to act as much as possible like it wasn't happening. I mean, I wore a mask and all that, but I have pictures with me and one other guy in the LaGuardia Airport security line. There were parts of that were incredible. I mean, if you were moving around in the world.
Yeah, strange time, I'll tell you. But
it gave me nothing that I want to write about or anything. Right?
No, but quite often it creates an emotion or a feeling in someone.
It's depressing. I mean, I don't like what happened. I don't like the fact that cities don't have people in them anymore, in terms of the remote work and all that.
Yeah. You see, and that's kind of the feeling that you get it. And as a creative, if you're writing, sometimes that makes you write darker or feel darker than you would normally. And sometimes it shuts people off, and some people go in opposite direction, You just don't know how it's going to change what you do when you're doing it, because it's not something that comes along every day.
Right.
But wow. Interesting conversation. Glad you came on the show. Now, your newest book of course, is called On Lonesome Roads. And our guest has been the author, Dan Flanigan. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it, and very much appreciated you having me on.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.